We're almost about time to start our next workshop today. Just a reminder that we have a shared folder that has all the resources that we've included for the presentation today, as well as some PowerPoint presentations, and there will be more that will be added to that after today's conference. So bear with us as we get that all uploaded. I'm going to switch it off over to Victoria Eckert right now. So Victoria, if you can unmute and introduce our next speaker.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Melanie. I have the pleasure to introduce Melissa Pietrkiewicz, LMSW. She is a staunch advocate for mental health awareness and is dedicated to creating trauma-informed systems that empower people with diverse life experiences to reach their full potential. Melissa works as a school social worker for Erie to BOCES and as a private therapist currently using her NP Speaks platform to help others cope during the pandemic. She holds a master's degree from the University of Buffalo School of Social Work and is the founder of the community action group Partners in Kind. Melissa has appeared on the AmeriCorps alumni blog as a guest author and served in the AmeriCorps National Community Corps in 2002. Melissa is an engaging presenter on topics in the mental health realm, infertility, and creating sanctuaries within the work environment. So welcome to Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I am Melissa Pietrkiewicz. I am the founder of Partners in Kind of Chautauqua County and NP Speaks. I am a social worker and very, very passionate about the things that we can do in our own community to prevent trauma and stop the cycle of trauma and traumatic experiences for kids and adolescents so that people can have a better life. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who's worked really hard to put this conference on. I think that it really goes to show the passion and dedication of the people that are working to put this conference on, to shift everything onto a digital platform, and go with an entire new set of challenges and changes. And so shout out to you guys for making this work today and still giving us all an opportunity to be here. To the participants, this is obviously something very different. Maybe some of you are a little webinared out or zoomed out, but this is a wonderful opportunity to be together digitally and learn from one another and hopefully leave here today with just what the conference was intended for, a little bit of hope and opportunities for healing. So I have some things that I want to talk about. Like I mentioned before, I have a very, very deep passion for serving in this community and looking at ways that we can better serve the populations that are most at risk or underserved or not served at all. And so with my background in mental health counseling, trauma really does drive a lot of things in people's lives in a negative way and has a very negative impact. But luckily for them and hopeful for us is that it doesn't have to be like that. There's answers. And so I know today's presenters and a lot of the information and even the information that I'm going to be giving, a lot of it is really difficult to hear, right? And it feels very heavy. And so it's important that I'm going to touch a little bit about trauma. I'm going to talk a little bit about the implications of trauma. But really where the soapbox comes out is when I start to talk about what we are doing about it. Not what we can do, but what's actually happening right now and what you can do to join in the fight on a variety of different opportunities to help people, whether it's mental health or substance abuse. We have a responsibility. We have a privilege and an opportunity every single day to show up for the people in our community. So I am going to, really hope to inspire you to take action, teach you a little bit, but I want you to leave this presentation today feeling inspired to go out and change the world in other ways that you already are. Let's see. All right. So if you've ever been in a presentation with me before, I always talk about the stuff, right? And so most of our learning, right, is through experience. It's not just things, words on a page that we read. It's life that's lived around us and life that we're given an opportunity to experience. And especially for me, not all of it is pleasant. Not all of it is happy. A lot of it is hard. And so I think a lot of people in this field are driven by some of that yuck, to maybe prevent things that have happened to them, or they're passionate about something that they watched happen to someone else. Irregardless of the why, we carry this stuff with us, right? And so today, as I'm talking about certain things, I really just want you to be mindful of your own stuff and do what you need to do to take care of you during this presentation. So the first thing that I want to teach you as far as taking care of yourself is I want you to bring forward in your mind a happy place. And I'll do it with you. Think of a place that when you're there, or the people that you're with, you that ultimate feeling of joy. And bring that to mind for a moment. Make a little space for the information that I'm about to give you, but I want you to keep that happy place right here, right front and center. And as we go through the presentation, if you need to, now obviously this is digital, so if you had to get up and walk away, you could. But if just for a moment you need to go there to bring yourself back, maybe out of feeling those intense feelings, then that's what I want you to do, okay? So I've kind of broken this presentation down into two different parts. We have the heavy, and then we have the hope, okay? So, today we're talking about substance abuse. I'm going to be talking about trauma. We're talking about things that don't typically make us feel good. For me, it activates a sense of ownership that as a social worker, a wife, a mother, a contributor to the society, I have an obligation to do better, to do for other people. And so for me, it's been a lifelong journey of how to take those feelings of angst and turn them around kind of internally and then push them back out. But unfortunately, if we don't spend time with the heavy, that passion is never lit, right? So some of you have probably been in my presentations before, in my in-services, but one of the reasons that I am very passionate about child trauma is because, like so many, I am a person with lived experience. The stories that come of my being brought into this world weren't about pink balloons and baby showers and homecomings. When my mom found out she was pregnant with me, my dad, from what she tells me, he says that, I was not wanted, right? And so at that point, my mom had a choice that she needed to put me up for adoption. And in the 80s, that's not something, right, that there were so many activists and open conversations about. And my mom had to make that really hard decision. The twist in the story is that at 6 months old, I was given back. And I wasn't wanted a second time around. And for a long time in my life, I let that story drive a lot of my behavior and decision making. Through a tumultuous childhood, through some hard life experiences and adolescence. And so for me, when I share that part of my story, even with my students, it's not something that I've ever shared for sympathy, but it's almost like an instruction manual for this is what has saved me. as a human being. And this is how I'm still here and able to contribute to our society. All of us have a story, and it's where we check out the cognitive distortions, and where we check out ownership, and where we look at what went wrong or what went right, and we turn around and we take our power back. And so some of the strategies that I'm going to be talking about are how we can encourage people and empower them to take their power back. Because at the end of the day, my story was just beginning. And without choice, I would still be in a place where that's all it was, but I wasn't wanted. And so this is the life that I fought for, and this is the message that I have really made it my professional passion to spread. So first we need to talk about Maslow, okay? And some of you who are coming from the education realm, you have heard my in-services before when we're talking about students, right? But let's broaden that scope a little bit and open it up to everyone. That if I don't have the physiological needs met, I can't function in society. Right, and so if we're thinking about homelessness, or we're thinking about sleep or food or access to clean water, right? Some of us who perhaps may be blinded by privilege are like, we don't have any of that in Chautauqua County. Wrong, very wrong. There are quite a bit of people who are homeless, but it looks a little different when you have 4 seasons. And it looks a little different in Chautauqua County, but I would pay top dollar on a bet to tell you that we do have homeless people here. You know, and then when you're moving up the hierarchy of needs and you're looking at safety, especially right now during this pandemic, there are a lot of things about safety that have been cut. From, you know, savings account to a weekly paycheck, access to resources, places are closed. People don't have what they need to survive, essentially, in a lot of different ways. And so right now, and which is why I gave birth to this MP Speaks, is that I'm really trying to get a message out right now that a lot of us, even us in the profession, even us who teach these things, we're just trying to survive. You know, and so going up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have love and belonging. And what does it really look like to feel like you belong? And only when you feel like you belong do you get to belong. You know, you reach that esteem, you reach the self-actualization about being who you truly are meant to be. And so unfortunately, a lot of people who have trauma or people who have substance abuse problems, there are things that have happened to them, or you know, things that they have experienced where they're stuck. They're stuck here between the safety and physiological needs, and that they're not able to reach, you know, their greatest sense of self. Right? They're stuck there. You know, but it's hard to think like that. But there's a lot of healing that can be done around that, and so we're going to talk about. So why does trauma matter, right? So trauma obviously matters to the individual person, but it's starting to matter more and more every day to service providers and people who are now understanding that it's a public health crisis and that the socioeconomical impact is vast, right? That people can't get jobs, they can't keep jobs. They're looking for ways to make sense of it all, and they're wondering what's going on in society. Well, when you peel those layers back, a lot of it is going to have to do with trauma. How did trauma even become a talking point? Well, there's something that's called adverse childhood experiences. And like I said in the description of this, I don't want to go too in depth about trauma and ACEs and things like that, because my assumption is that a lot of you have an understanding of this, but feel free to ask any questions that you want during the question and answer about those. You know, so basically there was an obesity clinic in San Diego back in the 80s, and Dr. Felitti was a leading researcher in obesity and treatment in obesity, and he was finding that he was getting people that were coming into clinic, they were losing weight, right? Wonderful. But then dropping out before the study could end, and he wasn't sure why these people were dropping out. And so he happened to track someone down that had dropped out because he wanted to know why people were leaving this study. And he spent some time with them, and he was asking questions, all related to weight, all related to obesity and practices around obesity. And so what he found was that there was way more to the story than calories in and calories out. There was a lot of pain behind those pounds. And there was a lot that he was finding that people had to say about their experiences. One of the questions that he asked was, how much did you weigh when you were first sexually active? This was one of his responses. Take that in for a minute. Only 40 pounds. I have to go to my happy place a little bit when I read that now because my son is 4 and he weighs 40 pounds. And it breaks my heart. And what that does is it sets fire to questions about what was happening to the rest of the people in this study and how many more of them. So Dr. Felitti took this information and shared it with some of the people in his professional network, and it eventually made its way over to Dr. Anda. Dr. Anda from the CDC, and what they decided to look at was they wanted to see what this relationship was between trauma and, you know, adverse child experiences, and looking at what happens down the road, what's happening to people from a health insurance, you know, standpoint of, you know, diabetes and heart disease and all of these other things that are happening to people. What do you mean this has to do with that, right? These are the conversations that they started to have. And so they analyzed the relationship between multiple categories of childhood trauma, and looking at the correlation between the experiences and outcomes over a person's lifespan, right? And, you know, the questions were based on themes that, you know, seemed to be the things that were repeated during these pre-ACE interviews. You know, and basically the themes had to deal with abuse, neglect, and loss. And you can look up a copy of an ACE study and read one over, but I'm here to tell you that you're not a number, right? That it's a screen, it's an educational tool, and it's something more so that people can understand that these experiences are having an impact on people later in life. You know, and so when we're talking about the data, you know, I'll be honest, when I first came into social work school and I had to take more statistics class, I was like, I don't understand why this is a big deal. I just want to learn how to help people. You know, and the ACE study really helped me to understand why it was a big deal, because when we're talking numbers, you know, or even now following, you know, the news today with numbers and understanding why data is important, because the data speaks for people who don't have a voice. You know, one of the most beautiful things that I read about Dr. Anda was that he said that when he looked over the data, he had waited and was excited to see, because he's a numbers guy. And when he saw how much people had suffered, he wept. He wept. That is beautiful and heartbreaking all at the same time, that he, you know, is not a people person per se. I cry all the time in sessions with students, you know, but for him to be an epidemiologist and cry over the data, that really tells you that we have a problem, or that, you know, back then they had a problem. So what is trauma, right? There's so many definitions of trauma as far as what it could look like for people and what it could look like for children. You know, you have refugee trauma, you have trauma that takes place inside our jail and prison systems, or even just being arrested is traumatic. You have children that are growing up in neglected households. You have children that are being bullied. You have soldiers and combat veterans that are coming back after multiple deployments, one right back to back, not even giving them a chance to do any type of processing from the first time. You have children and adolescents and adults that are living in violent neighborhoods. You also have, you know, what we normally come to when we think about trauma beyond soldiers is child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, right? So these are all examples of trauma. You know, but the thing that really gets me is not so much in the definition, but more it's the thought of someone encountering multiple instances of trauma. And how many times do we, trying to save a child, perpetuate more trauma on them because our systems are not trauma informed, right? Or when someone comes into counseling for a substance abuse problem, and our systems aren't trauma informed, we're actually doing more damage. You know, so for me, when I think about trauma, I think about triggers. I think about how people are forced to relive the incident. Thinking about a person who has been raped and is a survivor of sexual assault, and what that rape kit looks like, what it looks like to ever go to any type of OBGYN again. Thinking about how we force people sometimes to relive what has happened to them because we're not taking measures as providers to keep them safe emotionally. One thing that I see with my own eyes, especially in schools, is that children and adolescents and adults are always on alert. There's a sense of hypervigilance that they've had to maintain to stay alive, essentially. There's also unimaginable pain. There are things that people have been put through that you could not write to make a movie about without having your stomach hurt. There's also something about manipulated relationships, and that people who have trauma, they see the world differently. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But the other thing, you know, and that's one of the lasting impacts, is this altered thoughts, right? That they see the world differently, but also what they're thinking all of the time changes their behavior, right? So let's, you know, so basically when it comes down to trauma, you have two pathways. The first pathway is the world is a safe place, right? A baby that cries and has a mother that meets it gently and softly and feeds it and rocks it back to sleep, and those basic human needs are met. Those types of experiences, not to say that it needs to be a perfect childhood, but those types of experiences, they give off, you know, this opportunity to develop a sense of there's connection there, right? That there's a give and a take and a receive, and it's ever flowing, and that people who are growing up without traumatic experiences have a feeling of being connected to something bigger than themselves, right? These experiences foster that connection. When you have trauma or traumatic experiences, the world becomes an unsafe place, right? The people, especially who are perpetrated by their caretakers, learn at a very young age, I can't trust people. I can't ask to have my needs met because no one will meet them. The baby that's left to cry, you know, in a high chair, or, you know, the child that's abused by a caretaker. The world becomes this unsafe place. And what happens from there is that it fosters a sense of disconnection, right? And so this person who has these traumatic experiences and has all of this trauma then becomes isolated, and they're forced to live on this island by themselves for the rest of their lives unless they're able to seek some type of treatment or have an opportunity to be a part of something else where they can start the conversation for healing. And so why is altered thoughts so important in trauma? It's in manipulated relationships and people having to relive what's happened to them. It's brain-based. It's all very brain-based. And that we have something in our brain called plasticity. Dr. Bruce Perry talks very, very much about the plasticity of our brain. And thank goodness that it's like a muscle that we can work and work on. Because what we've learned is that when things fire together, they wire together, right? So if I'm growing up and I'm thinking that the world is an unsafe place and no one's going to take care of me, I'm participating now in my own shielding of positive relationships. I'm not going to be a student that feels safe talking to a teacher. Or I'm not going to be a kid who, sits down and learns in school because I'm so hypervigilant about what's going to happen to me when I come home, right? And so day after day, we build our brains based on our experiences. And it's up to us as providers to start those conversations around healing. And so what it looks like, and again, if you, have ever been in any of my in-services before, have heard me speak, when I'm talking about students, but this is also geared towards adults, that trauma leads to disrupted neurodevelopment, right? So that their brain and the pathways, they don't fire in the way that someone who doesn't have trauma does. And what else is happening is that they have an overactivated response system. So that's not a kid that comes to school that sits in the front seat that's ready to learn. That's not a guy who understands how to fill out all of these job applications and can do the X, Y, and Z of getting it to different places in 8 different appointments at 8 different times. Their brain works differently. Not better or worse, just different. Right? And it's a little bit of a different language that, we're learning to speak as providers as far as it comes to how we can help people with disrupted neurodevelopment and overactivated response systems. How many of you look both ways before you cross the street? Or you want your family to do the same? This semblance of hypervigilance, when used appropriately, okay, right? Like crossing the street or when a fire alarm goes off and you leave the building. This is how we as a species has survived, right? That rage and worry are functions of the brain to protect us. That type of Hulk-like strength that you've seen on videos where mothers like lift cars off of their children, or someone who can scale the side of a house to rescue a child. That is our brain working to protect us or protect our offspring or someone that our body is perceiving as offspring. This anger and anxiety is activated by the limbic system, and this heightened emotional response floods our body to combat potential danger. And this physiological response is intense. It is so intense. And that's part of what causes all of these health problems later on in life, or leaving our brain to turn to substances to look for dopamine, light us up in certain receptors because we're so numb. All of our stress hormones are already depleted because of these types of anxiety producing situations and experiences that we've been experiencing. And it's very basic, but people respond with flight, freeze, or fight, right? And a lot of times, I think over time, people just freeze and they numb out and they aren't able to participate in their own wellness because they're just so numb. It's not that they're not motivated. And things about developmental state and trauma and conditioning all take a toll on how quickly people activate you know, because there is some of this that is modeled, that you have a parent, for example, with trauma who is someone who activates very quickly. Their children learn and they model that same behavior. So, you know, I mean, with this, it's agony perpetuates agony, that these kids and young adults and whoever else are, you know, given an opportunity to thrive in the environment that's still making them sick. Nobody can heal in that environment. And people who don't have access to diapers, they don't have access to the basic human needs that they need to survive. The levels of stresses in the family, it perpetuates more toxic relationships. And that's not a level playing field for people. Whether it's a problem with drugs and alcohol or a child being diagnosed with ADHD, the playing field's not level if people don't have access to what they need. You know, and unfortunately, some people, they can't ever get ahead. And you see this cyclical, systemic, generational poverty after poverty being, you know, chained and shackled to the system because they don't know any other way. They don't have the coping skills being taught or modeled to them. They can't sit still long enough to learn those, right? And so it is. It's a breeding ground, and it's terrifying and terrible to think that some people are just going to have to be stuck there. And it enrages me as a human being to know that there are things that I could do or I could be doing differently to help people, really. So, you know, that's what this next part is about. When we go back to the hierarchy of needs, physiological, safety, we can be doing better. We can do more. We can do more. Not everybody has to be a philanthropist, but you can buy a pack of baby wipes. I buy iced coffee a couple times a week. I have money to buy baby wipes, you know, and so it's figuring out where we are and where we want people to learn and where we want them to heal. We have to do the work at the bottom, so that the people at the top, the people who are doing this amazing therapy or medical model or whatever it is to help people with their esteem and their self-actualization. But all of us have a responsibility to make sure that children especially are safe and their physiological needs are met. And that's how, you know, when we're looking at substance abuse, this is how we fix things for the next generation. So here's the hope, right? This is the hope. This is part 2. You know, I love that this compassion is a verb, right? That in my house, we say love is an action word, because it is. You can say that you love somebody, or you can say that you care about your community all you want while posting on social media, but what are you actually doing? You can learn everything that you want to learn about child poverty or substance abuse. And if it stops there, then what's the point of learning all of that if we're not doing something with it? And for me, the answer is in the action. You know, me spending this time with you all today, hoping to inspire some of you to show up differently or more, or, you know, celebrate yourself for being a person who does show up in your community. That's what this is about. Is that we can spend all of our time circling the drain on all of these problems and pointing fingers, but truly, I mean, the answer is, okay, great, I learned a lot today about all of this. Now what? So here's your now what. I love this. There's actually a Dispatch song that talks a little bit about this, but it's Desmond Tutu and the amazing movements that took place. Ubuntu talks about, I am because you are, right? Dr. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, so many other leaders have preached from the beginning of time that our society can't be meeting its greatest potential if there are people who don't have what they need. You know, and so for me, when I became a parent after struggling for years with infertility, you know, the thought of my son going to school and sitting at a desk next to a child who doesn't have a winter coat broke my heart. Right. And so again, instead of thinking about it and being sad, I did something about it. You know, and if you ever get to spend time with people from Partners in Kind, I truly believe that they are the best version of all of us. And there's lots of ways to serve in our community, but Partners in Kind aims to spread acts of kindness and help people who are underserved. Talking about the people, the populations that often don't get recognized as someone in need. And, you know, basically taking that love as an action word and showing up for other people in their darkest times. You know, and we operate a pantry where people can get diapers and wipes. You're a working person that now has custody of your grandson because your daughter has a substance abuse problem and she lost custody and you have nothing for that child. Let me fill up my car and I'm going to bring you what I have. It's that piece of action that fosters the connection that really we so desperately need. You know, it's the providing opportunities for connection, right? But it doesn't, to look at substance abuse and to look at mental health problems and the challenges that people face. And I'm not talking about something that's clinical, that's chemical, excuse me, you know, where it's a chemical condition. I'm talking about the things that happen to people in our society that we could be preventing, that we could be doing better about. You know, and if you peel those layers back, one of the things that it starts for is prenatal care, and our health department is rocking it out with the partnership and following these pregnant women for 2 years with their baby. That's amazing. You know, childcare. There are huge advocates in this county that we need better childcare. I, you know, have to rub my face when I read these articles about what childcare looks like during the pandemic for parents that are still going to work yet school is closed. You know, and so it's a conversation about where people need access to quality childcare, around the clock childcare too, because not everybody works 9 to 5. You continue to peel the layers back, and I'm thinking about the things that saved my life, and it was the extracurriculars. You know, if you think about the things that are first to go when fundings get cut, those are actually the things that save kids' lives, because they're able to speak through playing basketball, or they're able to speak through playing the trumpet and find something about themselves that they are in love with when the rest of the world had taught them that they were useless. You know, youth groups and field trips and the opportunities for experiences build empathy. I can't know anything about other people if I'm never subjected to anyone different than me. You know, and then there's something to be said about therapy in 12-step meetings and the magic that takes places in church basements when people get sober, right? You know, and also it's the opportunities for expression for people to tell their stories. You know, MP Speaks is something that I have where I'm helping people through mental health challenges through this pandemic. But it's also a way for me to express myself and my feelings during what's happening right now. Because the more that we tell our story, we take our power back, right? And so people would be less likely to turn to things that are instant relief for their discomfort. If there's something more positive there for them to pick up. I truly believe that. You know, but all the while, you can have all the art programs in the world, but if you have babies who don't have formula, or we don't have adequate housing for people that are getting out of rehab and work programs, if the basic human needs are not being met, what are we doing? What's our why? Right? Just the simple things that give us an opportunity to connect as human beings. That's where the healing comes from. You know, I remember when I first started out as a therapist, one of the, you know, because of course I come in and I have like all the books on, you know, DBT and CBT and TFCBT and the manuals and solution focused this and everything about everything and how to like help people and schema and changing their thinking. And the best thing that my supervisor at the time said is that you could be the best CBT therapist in the world, but if you can't build relationships with people, you have nothing to offer them. And that's really what this is. When we are able to take opportunities to make sure that people's basic human needs are being met and build relationships with them. My healing came not from a therapist, not from, you know, years and years of writing books and solving my problems in my head. It came from my youth pastor, right? And my softball coach and my mentors, right? And so giving people those opportunities to be seen and to be heard and show up as who they are, we as providers have to say yes a little bit more. Yes, you can have your meeting there. Yes, I will help fund that soup drive. Yes, I'm going to drop off some coffee cards to the people that are serving food at the mission. I want to keep this community afloat, right? And sometimes it feels, like I've said, very heavy that this is a tall order to take on substance abuse and prevention and fix the opiate crisis and fix everything else that's happening. But something is said about buying the coffee of the person in back of you. There's something to be said about handing out some extra hats and gloves. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It just has to be kind. That's how we fix this, one thing at a time. And there's big movement that takes place with funding and agencies and budgets and letting those people know in those offices what our message is, but also taking care of the people doing the work, letting them know that we appreciate them. You know, this thing that's happening right now, you know, has changed our world, and things will never be the same. And I don't say that to sound unhopeful. I say that to be a realist, that there are going to be a lot of things that are different, and I'm okay with that. You know, right now I can look out my bedroom window and there is a free table one house down, where someone who doesn't have a lot to give is giving away of her extra so that someone can have some, right? People are doing things, going above and beyond day after day to ensure that healthcare workers and, you know, police and rescue workers and people who work at Walmart are feeling appreciated and feeling loved. And what that does is that makes them want to do their job better, right? People are buying mattresses for people. People are sending pizzas to people anonymously because they know they need dinner. It's that. You know, yes, there's a medical model and there is, you know, budget things and politic things and big things that are going to have an impact on us clearing a way for the next generation to survive. But I believe that it starts with compassion and empathy for other people and giving a crap about your neighbor. I think it starts there. I really do. And I live my life by that principle. You know, and so as my ending, when, you know, we talk about substance abuse problems or we talk about trauma, is that those are very, you know, plain labels, but they're also very divisive, right? Like people love to just watch these viral videos of someone overdosing or someone who is unconscious in a car, or you know, the horrible, violent things that we're seeing on TV. And that divides us more. That's hate. That's the easy answer. Because when I think that I'm so much different than you, I can't be like you, and therefore I can't help you, right? But that's not the right answer. Because in the blink of an eye, anybody could be any of that. If you are predisposed to addiction and you pick up, you're trapped. It's not a choice. That could be your child. That could be you. We never know that. We never know. Today, we just have to show up for one another. And so with COVID-19, I've been spending a lot of time on the beach, looking at beach glass, and there's other people that are out looking for beach glass. And it's remarkable to me that these garbage, so to speak, that were thrown away by society so long ago, people competitively search for now and collect and make beautiful art out of. And so that's my message to the providers, and maybe you, if you're reading today and you're following along today in hopes to get sober, is that the rough and tumble of the waves, these experiences, substance use, trauma, whatever the case may be, they're creating you for your next opportunity to be useful and to be someone of value to someone else and yourself someday. So just keep going. Keep going, and you will find your way. So thank you to all of you today who have joined me through this. I am so grateful again for this opportunity. Because I am sheltering in place at home with my 4-year-old that I love so much, but he is very loud and very unpredictable. I recorded this ahead of time, but I'm now available for questions and answers. So thank you so much again for participating. And as the saying goes on Partners in Kind's page, it's cool to be kind.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa, for that presentation. And I think there are some questions in the box. Are you on the call, Melissa?
Yes, I am here. I put my email in the box, and also people can just go on Facebook and look up MP Speaks, and people can ask questions there.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, thank you.
There was one question. If do you have time for one question? Is that okay?
I do. I don't want to hold anything back, but sure.
Let's do one question. It came at the very beginning. Let me grab the question and answer box. It's from Sue Cunningham. She asked, is there a way to deal with or address the hypervigilance and move to the other side?
Okay, here I am. Okay, yeah. Hi, Sue. Thank you for that awesome question. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So basically, we used to think that the therapy and the treatment had to come top down our brain system. Emotional learning and reasoning takes place at the very top. In treatment is that when it comes to trauma or just these people who have this built-in genetic hypervigilance, that the treatment needs to start at the top or at the bottom. Okay, and so I hate to throw out the word very loosely, but I am a firm believer in practices like mindfulness, engaging touch, and the healing sensory input. Basically, anything that people can do to exert that energy that has them feeling very hypervigilant, even if maybe medication that needs to help them come down from that hypervigilance while they can go through the interventions and treatment. Something about movement. I have panic attacks, and so when I start to feel hypervigilant, I have to get up and walk or do jumping jacks and feel my input into my body. Bruce Perry is a wonderful resource when it talks about bottom-up healing. I would also encourage you to look at polyvagal therapy, which starts healing on the vagus nerve and helping people not activate their threat response so that they can heal and build healthy relationships. And feel free to reach out to MP Speaks on Facebook, and I can answer any more questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with us. It was very powerful and very inspirational, so thank you. We are going to have about a 13-minute break. Just a reminder about the survey. If you are not staying with us for our last session and closing remarks, please fill out the survey. We want to try to improve for next year. Again, the shared resource file will be put in the chat box again for easy access of PowerPoints, as well as other resources. So take a break, go for a quick walk, and we'll be back shortly.